John Smith took me out to play. Olivia Brown insisted on following. Then we encountered robbers, who pointed a gun at Olivia as a hostage, demanding John raise money. I'll never forget the look in John's eyes at that moment. He was full of concern and said to the robbers, "Can we switch hostages? She's pregnant and can't handle the shock." He looked at me. "Emily Wilson. I'm sorry. She's pregnant with my child. You take her place." Half a year later, I returned from the robbers, heavily pregnant. But John went crazy. Whose child is that? I thought I knew John well. After all, we were childhood sweethearts, engaged since we were little. I never dreamed that one day he'd claim my 19-year-old sister was pregnant and ask me to take her place as a hostage while she was expecting. I stared at him, dumbfounded, and blurted out a stupid question. Whose child is Olivia's? John pressed his lips into a thin line, refusing to answer. Even the robbers laughed. "I can tell whose it is." One lit a cigarette and pointed at John. "So who's the hostage?" John turned his head away, avoiding my gaze. Instantly, I felt like I'd plunged into an icy abyss. I truly never expected this from John, who'd always promised to marry me. The same John who treated me like a treasure, protecting me with such care. The John who wouldn't even glance at other women for my sake. Now he was looking at my sister with worry, telling her to be careful not to hurt the baby. Then he turned to me. "Emily, I'll definitely save you. Just bear with it for now, the child is innocent." Finally, he told the robbers, "Let her be the hostage, and I'll take the other one away. Otherwise, I won't pay a cent." Tears blurred my vision. John's handsome profile, once my greatest obsession, now seemed harsh and unfeeling with its sharp jawline. "John," the first said, trembling, "I'll go as the hostage." Truthfully, I had no choice. The spark in John's eyes when he looked at me was completely gone. All that affection had shifted to my 19-year-old sister. I sniffled. "But can you at least tell me when you started sleeping with Olivia?" I closed my eyes, desperately trying to recall. "Was it when I fell and called you? And you said you were in a meeting, but I could hear you panting. Or was it on my birthday, when you had red marks on your neck and claimed it was a mosquito bite, but wouldn't let me see? Or," my tears fell silently, "on my mom's anniversary, when you always went with me to visit her? But this year, you didn't answer my calls for 12 hours straight. So many times. I should have suspected you." I banged my head hard. But I never doubted him. Not once. I never doubted my childhood sweetheart, the man I loved with every fiber of my being. That he'd betray me. That he'd sleep with my sister. This sister, who was only recognized later. Olivia is my father's illegitimate child. My mom died of anger over her existence. After Mom passed, Olivia and her mother moved in and took over our home. From that day on, Dad seemed to stop being my father and became Olivia's dad instead. He gave her the most precious jewelry, the best located properties, and the most genuine paternal love. He told me, "Emily, don't be angry. Olivia never had a father growing up. While you had both parents, I just want to make up for past mistakes." He seemed to forget that Olivia, as an illegitimate child, not having a father was normal. I watched him donate to the university to get her enrolled. I saw him transfer company shares to her. I saw him pour all his fatherly love into this sister. I saw Olivia and her mother settle into our home. Her mother slept in my mother's bed, wore the jewelry my mother left behind, and went out for tea with my mother's old friends. I deeply understood what it means when people turn cold after you're gone. Even the servants changed their attitude toward me. I thought only John Smith would never change toward me. John Smith would hold me in his arms and say, "Don't be afraid. Once I marry you into the Fu family, all these people will come to flatter you, including your stepmother and Olivia Brown." I truly thought back then that John and I could be together forever. But later, Olivia fainted repeatedly in front of John due to her frailty, bruising her forehead but gritting her teeth without saying a word about the pain. again and again, like a frightened little rabbit. She pointed at the luxury brands on me and asked John what brand they were, saying she had never seen them before because she grew up in poor conditions. Again and again, she revealed scratches on her arm, then hurriedly covered them up, as if unintentionally reddening her eyes. And finally, under John's questioning, she collapsed crying into his arms. She cried and said that as a child without a father, she was bullied, developed depression, and felt compelled to self-harm to feel better. And John's hands, which had been stiff and unsure where to place, softened, and finally gently rested on Olivia's back, patting her tenderly. Just like at this moment, they embraced each other, not even turning their heads, and disappeared before my eyes. It seemed they had confirmed that I wouldn't come back. Watching John's figure fade away, a sharp pain shot through my heart. John, is this your final choice? Right. John didn't say a word. He just held Olivia, quickened his pace, and finally vanished from my sight. Utterly despondent, I turned to the thuggish kidnapper. Now, where are you taking me? He lit a cigarette and smiled. A hostage has no right to ask questions. At that moment, a star in the sky shone brightly, illuminating his eyes under his baseball cap. Those narrow eyes were filled with coldness. I thought I would die, but I didn't expect that I would survive for over half a year in the kidnappers' hands, until the police located us and came to rescue me. The kidnapper laughed as he was arrested, giving me one last look. At that moment, his narrow eyes were full of amusement, and I returned to the Wilson family. Waiting for me was Olivia with her big belly, my stepmother and father, and John with his unfathomable gaze. Seeing me, John took a step forward, staring intently at me. Emily Wilson. Olivia wiped her tears. We were all worried about you. Couldn't eat or sleep, and lost several pounds. Oh, really? I couldn't see that anyone had lost weight, except for John. He did look haggard. John gently touched my shoulder and said hoarsely, "Did you suffer a lot?" I subtly tilted my shoulder and stepped back. "Don't touch me." John's eyes darkened. "Emily, I know you're blaming me, but after I returned, I hired detectives, mercenaries, and searched everywhere for you," he said hoarsely. "I thought you would be fine. I thought I could send money immediately and hire people to find you, and you'd be all right. But I didn't expect you to be missing for so long. These 6 months I've been in agony every day. Emily, I hate myself." I was amused. "You hate yourself. Is it because you slept with your fiancé's sister? Or because you didn't use a condom at the time?" John was stunned. He had never seen me so sharp-tongued before. I was raised to always mind my image, being ladylike to the point of seeming fake. I was even too ashamed to say the words "use a condom." John tightened his lips. "I know. You hate me." I shook my head, walked around him inside. "Overthinking it. I'm telling you to stay away because I'm pregnant. Don't touch my child." "What?" John was stunned. A few seconds later, he forced a smile. "Emily, you're just trying to make me angry, aren't you?" Where could you have gotten pregnant alone before he finished? He shut up. Maybe he finally remembered. He had thrown me to an extremely dangerous man for over half a year. John Smith's face darkened, and he paced anxiously. "Emily Wilson, tell me this isn't true. I can't accept that you're pregnant." I sat on the sofa, gazing at the antique British porcelain plate on the coffee table that my mother had collected. The one she promised to give me as a dowry, now filled with my sister's favorite milk candies. I smiled. "Why are you so shocked? When you turned your back, didn't you know the consequences? You can't accept that I'm pregnant. Then what do you think I feel about Olivia Brown being pregnant?" I raised my hand, dumped the candies from the plate into the trash, and carried the plate upstairs. "My mother's things. You'd better not touch them." As I reached the top of the stairs, my father finally snapped out of it. "Wait. Explain how you got pregnant." My stepmother chimed in. "Yes. A plate isn't worth fussing over. Put it down and explain about the baby in your belly. I stopped. Turned back to them. It's the child of me and the kidnapper. Who else could it be? I pointed at my sister. Her child doesn't need explaining. But mine does. My sister touched her belly. Sister. John and I were swept away by passion at the time. We didn't mean to. But now that I'm pregnant. What can we do? She stared at the plate in my hand. A flicker of hatred in her eyes. As if I had stolen it from her. At least my baby's parents are decent people. Yours. The father is. What about mine? I looked at my sister and laughed. The father of my child is the best man in the world. Crash. Something shattered. Oh. It was John who accidentally knocked over the tea table, breaking a cup. His face turned ghostly pale as he stared at me. I used to always say that John was the best man in the world. Said it since I was little. But John pushed me into the abyss. Now I've climbed out of that abyss. And the man in my heart has changed. John was feeling lost now. I didn't understand. Isn't this all thanks to you? I headed upstairs to my bedroom. But when I pushed open the door, I almost thought I'd entered the wrong room. The entire space was drenched in magenta. Magenta bed sheets. Curtains. A magenta lampshade. A magenta vanity. It was a color I'd never use in decor. Now flooding my bedroom. This wasn't my room anymore. It was my sister's room, only she adored magenta this much. I sighed. When my mother died. In less than 3 days. Her bedroom, down to the furniture and layout, was swapped for the orange my stepmother loved. Even the nanny who'd raised me from childhood, who just muttered the bedroom isn't as elegant as before, was fired by my stepmother. Now history repeated itself. And I had nowhere to live. My sister followed behind and said, after I got pregnant, I needed more sunlight. So I moved into your bedroom. Do you want me to move back? My father dismissed it. Why make a big deal out of it between sisters? Just let her stay in your room. I shut the door. No. Seeing disgusting things triggers my morning sickness. I turned to go back downstairs. I'll stay at a hotel. My father was stunned. In the past, I'd never have defied him like this. I'd just cry silently. My sister, however, choked up. Sister, I already said. If you don't like it, I can move back. I frowned, pausing. Then move. Can't you see how clearly I dislike it? She froze, her tears forgotten. I gestured, go ahead. Move. I'll wait right here. I used to have a gentle temper. Never lost it with anyone. Thinking it was good breeding. But someone once told me that being too nice is a form of indulgence. Letting others walk all over you. That person was called Michael Davis. He once touched my hair and said, promise me you'll never let anyone bully you again. Okay. I promised him. So I stood in the hallway with my arms crossed, looking at Olivia Brown's teary eyes, listening to her sobs. Without saying a word, she said she would clear out the room for me. Unfortunately, I didn't wait for her to act, but instead waited for my father to settle the matter. This room has been occupied by your sister for so long. Clearing it out would be too troublesome, and it would take ages to organize everything. He pointed to the room opposite. You can sleep in your sister's room. I looked in the direction he pointed. Olivia's original room. Above the bed hung a huge photo of her and John Smith. And on the wall hung a wedding photo of my father and my stepmother that they had taken later. To make me face these two photos day and night in this room, with my original personality, I would have gone crazy, or at least half crazy. I looked at my somewhat unfamiliar father. When I was little, he had treated me like a little princess. He had also said that I was everything to him, and all he had was mine. Unfortunately, family affection can change just like that. I turned and went downstairs without any attachment. I'll just stay at a hotel. My father called after me. We haven't discussed how to handle the child in your belly yet. I heard him scold me. It's just a room. Can't you give in to your sister? How did your mother teach you? So petty. I stopped. Scold me if he wants. But why mention my mother? Mention my mother who accompanied him from scratch through hard times, enduring hardships for who knows how long. I turned back, squinting. If I were you, I'd have your daughter pack her bags now. By noon tomorrow, she will have to move out. With that, I walked away without looking back, leaving the house amid my father's scolding. This place could no longer be called home. As I walked out of the wrought iron gate, footsteps sounded behind me. It was John catching up. He grabbed my arm. It's just a bedroom. Is it worth staying out over this? I looked up at him. What's it to you? Who are you to me? John paused but still held my arm. The child in your belly. It's fake. Right. Impatient. I simply took out the ultrasound report from my bag. See for yourself. Quickly. After you see it, I'll call a cab. John flinched back as if the paper were a monster. His hand tightened, hurting me. I hissed and pulled my arm out. Put away the ultrasound report. And took out my phone to call a ride. John stood beside me, pale. Emily Wilson. How could this happen? His distress puzzled me. Isn't this what you wanted? The troublesome ex is pregnant with someone else's child. Will never be entangled with you again. Won't stand between you and your true love. John took a breath and shook his head. I didn't want it to be like this. He rubbed his temples. Since you disappeared, I've been distraught every day. That's when I realized you're actually important. Stop. No more sentimentality. I interrupted impatiently, raising my hand. The ride I called is here. I stepped into the ride-hailing car. As I closed the door, John grabbed the door again, urgently and humbly. Emily, let's terminate this pregnancy. Okay. This child makes me uncomfortable. I sat in the car, looking at the man before me. He looked haggard, with red veins in his eyes, lips pressed tight, seeming very nervous. But why wasn't he like this before? I pried John's fingers off one by one, smiling as I did so. In what capacity are you asking me to have an abortion? John, tell me. What capacity? As my brother-in-law. John fell silent. I pried his hand off and closed the car door. I lay on the big bed in the hotel, thinking about my occupied bedroom. It was the room with the best lighting and the most amazing view in the whole villa. My mom decorated it all by herself, from the curtains to the floor, from the bed to the sofa and the dressing table. Every detail was filled with my mom's love for me. Now it had been snatched away. I looked out at the pitch-black night outside the window and remembered that there was once a guy who told me a story at night. It was the second night after IW. As abandoned by John and taken to the mountains by the kidnappers. He said his name was Michael. He threw a drumstick at me and said, "Stop crying. Isn't it just that a man was snatched away from you?" I was so grief-stricken at that time that I forgot to be scared. I sobbed. It's easy for you to say. Do you know how miserable I am? Michael smiled. He held a cigarette between his lips, sat down beside me, and looked up at the night sky. I've never had a man snatched away from me. But my drumstick was snatched once. He held up the drumstick in his hand. I was homeless at that time and hadn't eaten for a whole week. That drumstick was given to me by a kind-hearted person, but it was snatched away. If I couldn't get it back, I would starve to death. In the first 23 years of my life, I had never heard of such a life in the world. I was so shocked that I forgot to cry and quietly listened to him continue. I was actually scared too. I wasn't an adult yet. And that homeless man was so tall and big. I hadn't eaten for a week because he snatched away all my food. I knew I couldn't beat him, but I didn't want to starve to death. Nor did I want to be robbed anymore. So I jumped up and onto his back and bit his ear tightly. No matter how hard he slammed me against the wall and made me see stars, I just wouldn't let go. All I could think about at that time was that I wanted to survive. I was so engrossed that I completely forgot about John. I chased after him and asked, "And then?" Michael tore off a piece of chicken and chewed it with big mouthfuls. His beautiful, narrow phoenix eyes were squinted with a smile. Anyway, I survived between the two of us. Since then, No one in that area dared to snatch my things. He pointed at my drumstick, gesturing for me to eat. Later, every time I eat a drumstick, I'll think that it doesn't matter if others snatch from me. As long as I'm brave enough, I can make sure that they'll never dare to touch my things again in their lives. That night, after Michael finished eating the drumstick, he left. I looked at the night sky and thought a lot. Then I took a big bite of the already cold drumstick in my hand. Now, half a year later, as I looked at the night sky, I suddenly realized that I wanted to eat a drumstick. Before I took out my phone to order takeout, I casually sent a WeChat message to my dad. Restore the bedroom to its original state before noon tomorrow, or I'll cash out all the stocks in my mom's hand. 2 seconds later, my dad started calling me like crazy. I didn't answer any of them. I put my phone on silent, ate the drumstick, went to sleep, and waited to check on my bedroom the next day. I've inherited all the shares in my mom's hand. My dad has been making a big fuss about this and hasn't been home for several nights. But my mom still managed to complete all the procedures before she left. If I cash out the shares, although I can't make my dad's company go bankrupt, it will definitely be severely damaged and won't recover for 5 years. Seeing that I didn't answer the phone, my dad sent me a WeChat message. You used to be so obedient. Have you forgotten? You've made your dad sad. Yeah. Because I was obedient, my bedroom was snatched. My dad's affection was snatched. And my fiancé was snatched. This time, I've decided not to be obedient anymore. Seeing that I didn't reply, my dad sent voice messages, each one 60 seconds long. I clicked on one, and it was my dad swearing. I just turned it off, opened Baidu to search how to cash out the shares, and sent the screenshot to my dad. My dad stopped scolding. A few seconds later, he sent a message. Come here at 12 o'clock noon tomorrow. The next day, I got up very early to visit Aunt Chin. I hadn't seen Aunt Chin for a long time. Aunt Chin is a major shareholder in my dad's company. At the beginning, when my dad faced a capital shortage and asked people everywhere for investment, no one paid him any attention. It was my mom who went to befriend Aunt Chin and persuaded her to invest. Over the years, Aunt Chin has become her good friend. It's a pity that during the period before her death, she was so depressed that she didn't want to see anyone. So Aunt Chin didn't know what had happened between my parents. By the time she found out, my stepmom and stepsister had already moved in, and I was under my dad's control. He even wouldn't let me answer Aunt Chin's calls. Thinking about myself back then, I was really even less tough than a block of tofu. If I hadn't been kidnapped, if I hadn't seen some things clearly at the critical moment of life and death, if Michael hadn't given me another possibility in life, maybe I would have been bullied to death without anyone caring. When Aunt Chin saw me, her eyes welled up with tears. Your dad won't let you contact me, right? She asked. I nodded. The tears that hadn't fallen since I came back started to stream down one by one. It's time to settle some scores. At 12 noon, I walked into my bedroom on time and let out a soft exclamation in my heart. All my delicate ornaments, plain beddings, and even the flowers on my terrace and the chaise longue had been perfectly restored. I turned around and nodded to my dad. Well done. It seems you're really afraid that I'll cash out my stocks, I said. My dad looked gloomy. My stepmom tried to smooth things over. Shao. What are you talking about? You're so childish. Your dad has been thinking about holding a welcome home party for you to get rid of the bad luck. I had been looking at my newly trimmed nails casually. Hearing this, I raised my eyebrows. A welcome home party. I stood up. Sure. I'd like to attend. I glanced at my dad. You're going to hold a welcome home party for me? No wonder after I was kidnapped for half a year and came back, you didn't even look at me more than once. So you were planning a surprise for me? My dad's face darkened. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but seeing my half-smiling expression, he gritted his teeth and nodded. He also gave my stepmom a glare. as if blaming her for being talkative. My stepmom probably didn't expect that the once quiet Emily would now seize the opportunity so readily. But wait. There are still many more unexpected things to come. I looked at the bracelet on my wrist. It was an unremarkable silver bracelet with rough workmanship and an ugly pattern. Because of its plain appearance, no one noticed that there was a rare emerald inlaid on it. This was given to me by Michael. He carefully put it on my wrist. Tomorrow, you'll return to the sunlight. Fight, snatch, tear and bite. Find every way to take back what belongs to you. And then stand above them and look down on them. He put the bracelet that his father left him for a rainy day, which he didn't sell for money even when he was on the verge of starvation, on my hand solemnly. I stroked the bracelet on my hand and urged my dad. What's wrong, Dad? Don't you know who to invite to the welcome home party? Let me help you think. I called Aunt Chen. Aunt Chen, my dad is going to hold a welcome home party for me. Can you help me think about who to invite? Or you can invite them on my behalf. It'll be livelier with more people. And it can get rid of the bad luck. My dad's face turned ashen with anger. Emily, are you getting too big for your boots? You're pregnant and the situation is so unclear. And you still have the nerve to show your face. I pointed at my stepsister. Then what do you think of my stepsister's pregnancy? My dad was speechless. My stepmom tried to smooth things over again. What's done is done. It's meaningless to haggle over it. We'd better accept the reality. Let go of our grudges. And bless your stepsister. After all, you're blood-related. I nodded with a smile. I didn't say I wouldn't accept it. I can give John to Olivia. I don't want him. But the welcome home party must be held. My dad looked at the phone in my hand. The call page was still open, showing the name of a well-known local securities broker, a good friend of Aunt Chen. He was especially good at cashing out stocks. My dad nodded with a dark face. Having achieved my goal, I didn't want to stay with them any longer. I locked my bedroom and went downstairs. My stepsister followed me silently, with a resentful look in her eyes. But when we were almost at the first floor, she suddenly asked me, Sister, you said you'd give John to me. Is that true? I waved my hand as if to shoo away a fly. Who would be obsessed with a piece of trash? If you want him, of course I'll give him to you. You're a perfect match. Just then, I heard a cough. John was standing downstairs, with a straight posture and a slightly raised chin. But his pale face couldn't be hidden. The welcome banquet drew quite a crowd. Nearly everyone from the city's social elite had been invited by Aunt Chen. My father had famously thrown an extravagant 19th birthday for my sister, Olivia, attended by half the business community, complete with champagne towers, cake displays, and the immediate gifting of property deeds, diamond jewelry, and car keys. Yet my homecoming celebration surpassed even that spectacle. The event planning team Aunt Chen had insisted my father hire was renowned for lavish, opulent styles notoriously expensive. I knew my father was wincing at the cost. He'd spend on Olivia without blinking. But spending on me pained him. Still, clutching the shares, I demanded an allowance from him for my attire. The world's top haute couture gown and jewelry were secured. On the night, I appeared in a golden fishtail gown, a necklace and earrings set with the finest sapphires, my hair styled in vintage waves, and lips painted a fiery red. The moment I stepped out in my heels, the entire room fell silent for an instant. Then came the hushed murmurs. The eldest daughter of the Wilson family is this stunning. Why does old Wilson always praise his younger daughter's beauty and never mention the eldest? The younger daughter is a delicate beauty, but the eldest radiates charm. I'm rooting for the older one. I walked through the whispers straight to John Smith. John watched me quietly, a flicker of astonishment in his eyes. Emily, he said, his voice low and husky, his gaze lingering on my lips. I never knew you had this side to you. Smiling, I extended my hand. The opening dance. May I? Delight surfaced in John's eyes. Of course. Olivia bit her lip, calling out softly, "John." The first don't feel well. But John didn't hear her. A man who'd abandoned his fiancé at gunpoint could hardly be expected to remember a mistress who'd lost her novelty when faced with fresh allure. He took me into his arms and led me onto the dance floor, our movements flowing with the music. "Emily, I've missed holding you like this," John murmured against my ear. I smiled, pressing a finger to my lips in a silent show. As we spun across the floor, my eyes met his, watching his growing intoxication. So this is the man I loved for so long. I leaned my head against his shoulder. "Could you tell me about your family's investments south of the city? You know my situation, I have no one to rely on. They say it's better to depend on oneself than others. If I could learn to earn my own way." John chuckled softly near my ear. "Of course, I'll teach you anything you want to learn, as long as you keep smiling at me like that." As the music ended, John and I parted and stepped off the dance floor. Olivia's eyes were red-rimmed, gazing at John with pitiful fragility. Unfortunately for her, John still didn't notice. Aunt Chin tapped her glass for attention. "Everyone, I have a request. Or rather, a decision I'd like to announce tonight." She pointed towards me. "This is the daughter of my dear friend, and a heiress of Punghue Group. The other shareholders and I have watched her grow up, and I shared a close personal friendship with her mother. After discussion today, we, as shareholders, propose she join Penghue's management for training. Should she inherit the family business in the future, we would be confident in her leadership." The room was stunned. Smiling, I walked to Aunt Chin, thanked her, then looked down with cool detachment at my father's flustered expression and Olivia's bitter resentment. Olivia had once wanted to join the company but refused to start from the bottom, demanding a general manager position outright. Aunt Chen and the shareholders had blocked it, declaring they couldn't trust such an attitude in management. Yet now, this neglected daughter was being strongly endorsed. Meeting the furious, almost incendiary glares from Olivia and my stepmother, I flashed an even brighter smile. What can I say? When my father had nothing, it was my mother who stood by him, building the business. The shares she held truly had the power to cripple him. The relationships she maintained for him were genuinely intimidating. Pity she, like me, never realized how to wield those resources before. As elegant music filled the banquet hall, I laughed recklessly under my father's furious gaze, danced, and mingled with guests doing things the introverted Emily Wilson of the past would never have dared. I became the most captivating presence of the evening, holding John's gaze firmly. Olivia trembled with rage, complaining tearfully to our father, her face streaked with tears. After Aunt Chin went to chat with my dad for a while, my dad nodded wearily and pushed Olivia Brown away. I watched the commotion over there across the dance floor, raised my glass to Olivia, and took a sip of the grape juice in my cup. Olivia stared at me for a moment, then suddenly walked toward me. When she reached me, she slipped and bumped into me. I stumbled from the impact, and Olivia exclaimed loudly, "Sister, sorry. I didn't mean to. Is your baby okay?" The first trimester is the most dangerous time. The banquet hall immediately fell silent. People murmured, "Is Emily Wilson pregnant? Who is the father?" "Don't know. But she did disappear for half a year. So, she went to have a baby. How come we didn't hear about her getting married?" I shrugged, listening to the gossip as a boring pastime. But in my heart, I remembered the cunning bright eyes of the father of my child. Back then, I cried every day, almost to the point of blindness. Michael Davis initially shouted fiercely at me to stop crying. But later, when I realized he wouldn't hurt me, I cried even louder. Michael helplessly handed me a tissue. Then after a moment, scratched his head and said, "How about I send you back? The ransom has been paid anyway." I shook my head. I wasn't crying because I was forced to go with Michael. I was crying because I truly had no home. My mom was gone. My dad had become Olivia's dad. And John Smith had become Olivia's. I had no one close to me. What was the point of sending me back? I had no home. Anywhere was just drifting. Michael watched me cry quietly for a while, then curiously asked, "You've come to this point. Why don't you even curse a bit to vent your anger?" I sobbed and said, "A girl should have manners. Some words, no matter the circumstances, should never be spoken." Michael was stunned. After a moment, he laughed uproariously. "No wonder you were robbed of everything, leaving you with no home, no dad, no man, nothing left for you." I glared at him angrily, but he wiped my tears and told me a story. The story was simple. Two good friends, one well-mannered and cultured, the other clever and flexible with his morals. The well-mannered one started a company with his own patent, made money, and willingly offered to help his friend earn together, completely trusting. But his friend stole the patent technology and sold it to a competitor, earning his first pot of gold for starting a business. The well-mannered man, who had always followed the law, couldn't imagine such underhanded tactics beyond fair competition and literally died of anger. He left behind a wife and a young child. The wife abandoned the child and ran off, leaving the kid to wander the streets. Meanwhile, his friend thrived, having affairs, getting rich, and his wife dying. Life was a breeze for him. Michael tossed me a tissue and said, "Do you want to die with manners, or live to turn things around? Your choice. If you decide, I'm bored and can teach you, just to kill time." I clutched the tissue and stayed up all night, thinking hard. My mom had manners, but she died of anger. I had manners, but I was abandoned. And in that story, the well-mannered man's child suffered too. At dawn, I went to Michael with red eyes and said, "I want to live to turn things around. I want all the bad people to get the punishment they deserve." By the end of the welcome banquet, my dad, Olivia, and my stepmom couldn't muster a smile. Only John kept his eyes fixed on me, following my every move as I laughed freely, danced wildly, and chatted with all sorts of people while holding grape juice, watching me become the absolute center of attention and queen of the banquet hall. After the party, before Olivia could approach him, he stepped toward me first and asked, "Do I have the honor of driving you home?" Amid Olivia's resentment, I smiled and nodded. "Yes, you do." The night breeze was cool, stirring my hair, leaving John mesmerized. He opened the car door for me to get in. I remembered when we first met. He used to open the car door for me too. Later, he never walked side by side with me. Always him in front and me jogging behind. He never once opened the car door for me. I got into the car and waved to Olivia Brown in the back. "Go home early. Be careful not to catch a cold after all. Your belly is bigger than mine." John Smith silently glanced at me. After the car had driven a few kilometers, John glanced at me again. "I remember you used to depend on me a lot." Yes, I used to be a wealthy young lady, clumsily learning to make packed lunches from online tutorials, carrying them to John's company to give him a love-filled lunchbox. But he coldly rejected me. He said, "I don't want to see you in a work setting. It affects my efficiency." Later, when I calculated the timing, that was exactly when my sister was pregnant. Olivia was home every night. So when did she get pregnant? I looked at John's profile. It was still sharp and stern, just like when he rejected me. But while rejecting me, he got my sister pregnant at his workplace. I pursed my lips into a smile. I used to have no opinions of my own. But later, someone taught me to be independent and strong. When I talked about that person, even the corners of my mouth lifted in a sweet curve. That curve seemed to wound John. He slammed on the brakes, stopped the car, and stared into my eyes in the darkness. "That man, isn't he a criminal? Why do you bring him up so happily, under the dim yellow glow of the streetlight?" He looked at me and sighed. "Are you trying to make me jealous? If so, you've succeeded." "No," I interrupted him. I smiled even more sweetly. "He's the best person in the world. You'll never understand. In the car window's reflection, I saw my own image, eyes crinkled with laughter, shimmering with tears, crimson lips parting as I spoke the sweetest words, turning into a knife that stabbed fiercely at John. I love him so very much. The car fell into a deathly silence, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. John's eyes clouded with intense pain. Don't say that, Emily Wilson. I beg you. He rubbed his temples. I've heard of a condition called Stockholm Syndrome, where hostages develop feelings for their captors. It's sick and abnormal. Emily Wilson. It'll take you to get checked. Like a man lost and desperate, he kept making excuses for me, trying to prove I didn't love Michael, that I was just sick. I kept smiling, watching his lips move and his Adam's apple bob, neither refuting nor agreeing, because deep down, I knew the real sickness was cheating with a sister-in-law and pushing a fiancé toward a dark gun barrel. The real sickness was enduring hardships with a loyal wife, only to bring home a loved child when it was time to enjoy the rewards, driving the wife to her death, and mistreating the children she left behind. The real sickness was stealing the father's love from the legitimate children and still not being satisfied, wanting to steal their romance too. The sickness was in those people, not me, and not Michael Davis. But I didn't say it. I just watched them perform. When I felt the show could end, I would destroy that sick stage in one move. John was still asking. I guess he forced you to get pregnant. Emily, I'm not holding it against you, but I always wonder, if I hadn't left you behind back then. I smiled, no longer interested in arguing. He wouldn't believe me. And as for force, Michael did force me, but to do other things. Things that caused me immense pain yet made me stronger. He forced me to accept his training. He said that with a strong body, the spirit becomes fierce too. He taught me combat, shooting, tracking and counter-tracking, even hunting. That boy who once fought to the death over a chicken leg, raised on brutal streets, later became a mercenary. After seeing him hunt, I realized how rare his gentleness was. That day he brought me back to the mountains. When hunting, Michael was the most ferocious predator at the top of the food chain. Watching his cold-blooded gaze, seeing him battle beasts, training alongside him, I suddenly realized all those things I used to cry over weren't such a big deal. It wasn't even worth making me shed a tear. I secretly swore that I would never shed a single tear again and never let myself be weak again. However, in the month before I separated from Michael, I still cried. I dreamed of my mother. She smiled and told me that she was finally at ease with me and could leave, no matter how I called her. She didn't look back. I woke up crying heart-rendingly and threw myself into Michael's arms as he rushed over to check on me. Michael stiffened for a moment, then hugged me tightly and hummed a lullaby in a low voice to comfort me. It was on that day that I got pregnant with his child. A child I was willing to conceive. I joined my dad's company. I chose to follow up on the project that was in cooperation with John's company. My dad was reluctant, and so were my stepmom and my sister Olivia. But John was willing. The Smith family was powerful, and John specifically asked for me to be in charge. My dad had to swallow his anger. He talked to me privately. Daughter, Dad knows that you've been kidnapped and are pregnant. You're just stimulated. You're still the good girl you used to be, right? Don't make your sister angry. She's about to give birth. Be a good girl for Dad. Okay. I stood up with a smile and whispered in my dad's ear. No. People change. The more docile a person is, the more determined and irreversible they are when they decide to change. That's why people say not to provoke docile people. Unfortunately, my dad didn't understand this. I had frequent business interactions with John and often had meetings with him. My sister used to be considerate and played the role of a gentle girl. But as John and I had meetings that lasted late into the night, had meals and coffee together, and even when I went to the hospital for a cold, John would drive me there. Olivia was on the verge of a breakdown. She had a big fight with John. It was said that she was kicked out of John's office and blocked on WeChat. Olivia coldly asked me, Are you satisfied now? I whistled while looking at the documents and said, "This is just the beginning. My dear sister. Fortune always changes." Olivia sneered. "But don't you forget. Impregnant with John's child. And the one in your belly is just a bastard." I put away the documents, looked up at her, and slowly stood up. "Didn't your mother teach you to speak nicely?" I picked up the coffee and slowly poured it on her head. "Don't you know where the child in your belly came from? How dare you talk to me like that?" Olivia screamed and tried to dodge. But I held her down. I took out a tissue and wiped her face. Olivia's face turned red with anger. "Wiping my face won't help. I'll tell John what you've done to me." Ah. Before she could finish her sentence, she got a solid slap on the face that I had just wiped. Wiping her face was just to avoid getting coffee on myself. Olivia covered her face in pain and couldn't say a word. She ran out crying. After all, I was a woman trained by Michael. My slap was no joke. I carefully wiped each finger with a wet wipe, feeling a bit impatient. Why should I waste my time and life on these villains? And why should Michael be put in prison because of a prearranged kidnapping? I narrowed my eyes. It was time to end all these grudges. I went to John's office even more frequently to discuss the project with him, sometimes after we finished the business. I didn't leave. I chatted with John casually and listened to him discussing the investment decision in the south of the city with his subordinates. I made coffee for him and brought snacks. "I want to learn more from you. If I could learn half of what you know, it would be enough for me." John Smith smiled gently. "Emily Wilson, how did I never notice how adorable you were back then?" Actually, he forgot that for over a decade before meeting Olivia Brown. He had always praised my cuteness. But in the few short years since Olivia arrived, he chose to forget me selectively. I became a hostage shielding Olivia from disasters. No longer the girl he swore to cherish. Yet John did teach me a lot, explaining every decision in detail and predicting competitors' strategies for me. I absorbed it all hungrily, memorizing every word. To outsiders, John and I seemed to have reconciled. This panicked Olivia and my stepmother. But surprisingly, my dad didn't side with my sister this time. I figured it was because John offered him 2 projects. Silencing him. See, as long as there's money to be made. Even if John toyed with both his daughters in turn, he could collect the profits with a clear conscience. My intimacy with John lasted a week. One day, he called and asked me to come to a private hospital. I thought he was sick and wanted me to visit. So I reluctantly had my secretary order a bouquet of flowers to bring along. But when I arrived, I found John had directed me to the obstetrics clinic. Of course, I didn't believe John was being kind enough to help with my prenatal checkup. I took a step back and threw the flowers on the ground. "What are you trying to do?" A fanatical gleam shone in John's eyes. "Emily, I want to win you back. I don't want this vague, ambiguous fling anymore." He glanced at my slightly swollen belly. "I want you to belong to me alone again." Though I'd been disappointed in John before, I never imagined I could be even more disappointed now. I lowered my head, touching my stomach. "So you want to harm my child?" And without even discussing it first, planning to act without permission. John looked troubled. "Emily, I can't stand by and watch you develop Stockholm Syndrome, unaware of your true feelings. I've arranged a therapist for you, but this baby has to go first." He reassured me. "In the future, we'll have a new child together. A better one than this." I clapped a hand over my mouth. My baby had been so considerate, never causing me morning sickness throughout the pregnancy. But now, even my unborn child felt nauseated, covering my mouth. I tried to run out, barely holding back the urge to vomit. But John blocked my path. "Emily, have the surgery before you leave. Be good if you want a child. I can give you one. Let's just get rid of this criminal seed." I steadied my breathing, fighting desperately to suppress the nausea. I silently pleaded with the baby in my belly. "Hold on, sweetie. Mommy needs to punch someone first." My fists clenched as I quickly ran through the plan in my mind. It was almost complete. No need to continue this charade. I looked up at John and asked him seriously, "Who gave you permission to call the love of my life a criminal?" John opened his mouth. But before he could speak, I punched him square in the face. Blood streamed from his nose. He stared at me in shock. "Emily," I pressed on, "and who gave you permission to call my child a criminal seed?" I threw another punch at him. But John had trained in martial arts since childhood and, now alert, dodged it. I grabbed his tie and wiped the blood off my knuckles. "John, think twice before you speak from now on. Don't be so arrogant. You're not money. Why on earth would I like you?" John pressed his lips together, the corners of his mouth drooping slightly, his voice hoarse. "Emily, what kind of spell have you fallen under? You'd rather bear a kidnapper's child than give me one chance." "Exactly. I couldn't even be bothered to give you one chance. And soon. I'd make you regret ever messing with me." Leaving the hospital, I decided to wrap up the plan. I drove home, entered my dad's study, and removed the listening device hidden under the desk. I went to the company again. As a member of the management, I breezed through to my father's office. While he was in a meeting, I deftly removed the listening device hidden beneath his desk. The next day, instead of going to the office or returning home, I checked into a hotel. Over the next 2 days, I liquidated all my mother's stocks. On the 5th day, Mrs. Chen withdrew her investments. My father's company plunged into immediate crisis. He began frantically calling and texting me, reminiscing about my childhood. He sent me a photo of him holding me during a picnic, kissing my cheek as we appeared inseparable, but had forgotten that photo was taken by my mother. Staring at it, all I could think of was her. I wondered if she might still be alive had she met someone like Michael Davis. Unfortunately, there are no what-ifs in this world, only regrets. Sighing, I retrieved the listening equipment and began compiling all audio recordings from my father's office and home. After selecting the most critical clips, I uploaded them online. The next day, Pennyway Group became nationally infamous. Pennyway Group CEO exposed for tax evasion, illegal fundraising, and bribery became the day's top trending topic. Pengio's stocks plummeted, and shareholders demanded answers from my father. He snapped. He texted me, "You're so unfilial. Aren't you afraid of karma?" Smiling, I replied, "Why should I fear karma when you don't? Heaven wouldn't spare someone who drove his wife to death and murdered his friend, only to punish me. Right, dear Dad." To ensure he understood, I added, "Oh, and Michael Chenming sends his regards from down below, Dad." He didn't respond immediately, but his typing status lingered for a long time before he finally sent, "How do you know Michael Chenming?" How did I know? I lowered my head, gently touching my slightly rounded belly, a smile curling on my lips. "He's my child's grandfather. They'll never meet. He's Michael's father, cultured, principled, yet betrayed by his friend who stole his patent and destroyed him. My father was arrested. My stepmother, implicated in the crimes, was also taken into custody. The company collapsed, declaring bankruptcy. All our real estate assets were seized to repay debts. My pregnant sister Olivia was evicted from the mansion. Sobbing, she went to John Smith for help, but he merely gave her money for a hotel, didn't even let her stay at his place. He called me, "Emily, I know this must be incredibly hard for you. Don't worry, I'll handle everything." Meanwhile, I was sipping tea with John's biggest business rival. In my hands were documents containing all of the Smith family's commercial secrets and lifelines. Answering his call, I smiled, my eyes crinkling. "Thank you," I said cheerfully, "but you should focus on yourself first." 3 days later, John's family lost a major deal. A week after that, their largest partner defected. Within 3 months, several competitors besieged the Smith empire. Gray area business scandals surfaced, causing an uproar. Banks froze their credit lines. The Smiths' downfall accelerated rapidly. John no longer had time for me. Only once, deep in the night, he called, exhaustion heavy in his voice. Olivia gave birth. I paused before replying. Congratulations. Memories drifted back to that afternoon years ago when John announced Olivia's pregnancy and demanded I become their bargaining chip. But the pain I'd felt then was gone now. Replaced by cold relief. Relief that I'd been the hostage instead of Olivia and that she'd been the one to bear John's child. Fortunately, my child is Michael Davis. John Smith seemed to be smoking. I heard him exhale smoke. I've figured it out. Emily Wilson, he said. The only person who could simultaneously bug your home and office to eavesdrop on your dad, and be ruthless enough to deal with him, is you. And all the leaked business secrets from the Fu family were things you overheard. All of this was your plan. I lowered my head to sip tea, grinning as I replied. So what? John didn't speak. He suppressed his breath. After a while, he coughed and let out a bitter laugh. If I keep the child and make Olivia Brown leave, would you still be willing to come back? Even though I'd grown numb to John. Hearing his words still made me nauseous. Are you not planning to keep the child and abandon the mother? John's voice trembled. Emily, whether you believe it or not, even knowing what you did, I still want you. I regret it. I regret getting Olivia pregnant. And I regret sending you as a hostage. Letting that man take you away. His voice was low, depressed and dejected. Now your dad and stepmom have been arrested. My family is severely weakened. Emily, you should be satisfied. I'll make Olivia leave. Can we start over? Haven't I atoned enough to satisfy you? I swallowed my tea and looked out at the city lights. In one more year, Michael could be released. Michael and I would have our own warm light in this city too. Imagining the future lifted my spirits. And I smiled, saying word by word to John. But Mr. Smith, you're not even fit to wipe my love's shoes. You only deserve to be tangled up with trash like Olivia. After hanging up, I stood by the window gazing at the night, breathing a long sigh of relief. All grudges ended here. For the rest of my life. I had Michael. A year later, two big events happened. My daughter was born, and Michael got out of prison. When my daughter was born, John got the news. After the Wilson family's villa went through foreclosure auction, I bought it back and remodeled it entirely in the style my mom originally designed. Now, my daughter and I live there, carrying my daughter home. I saw John's car when I got out of the car. The Fu family was severely weakened. John was almost starting from scratch now. No longer the glamorous figure he once was. Looking much more down and out. But he still had ability. And the Fu family was slowly recovering. Olivia had a baby but never became Mrs. Smith. She constantly pressured him to marry. But John refused every time. Olivia lost her gentleness. Arguing endlessly with John every day. Making the baby cry loudly. John spent his days trying to salvage the Fu family's business and his nights fighting with Olivia. When we met again, he looked much more haggard. Seeing the child in my arms, his eyes dimmed as he forced a bitter smile. Even though he was in prison, you still had his child. He lowered his head. I believe now that you truly love him. In a hurry to get my daughter home, I just replied, "Oh, yeah, that's right." John laughed bitterly again, with a touch of sorrow and weariness. As I was about to close the door, he suddenly asked, as if to me or himself, if back then, I hadn't been obsessed with that bit of novelty, would this be my child with you now? I shook my head. John, there are no ifs in this world. Only what can't be undone. After a moment's thought, I added, but am grateful you chose Olivia. Otherwise, how could I have met my love? That man who shone like a light in my darkest hour. When everything settled, I was still full of gratitude to fate for giving me the right person. John swayed slightly, his face paling. After a while, he laughed. I just smiled weakly. That's good. Then, I won't bother you anymore. I wish you happiness for the rest of your life. He turned around, his back looking lonely under the sunset. Goodbye. I watched his back, suddenly remembering our childhood. Little John Smith raised his hand and swore to little me. I, John Smith, will be good to Emily Wilson for life. If I fail, may I be lonely for life? Back then, no one knew that vows were just a kind of joke. I sighed and carried my daughter home. My dad was sentenced. My stepmom was sentenced. My sister Olivia Brown and John despised each other. All the past events were finally over. Next month, Michael Davis should be out of prison. A month later, I took my daughter to pick up Michael Davis. Michael held my daughter in his arms and winked at me, as if about to smile. But the next second, he suddenly burst into tears, crying uncontrollably, and hugged us tightly. I hugged him back, my tears soaking his shoulder. Now, I finally had a family again. Michael Davis Extra. My name is Michael Davis, and I grew up on the streets. People say I'm terrifyingly ruthless, but they don't know that if I weren't ruthless, I would have died at 9 years old. In that confrontation over a chicken leg. Because I was ruthless, I rose to the top of the street's food chain. Because I was ruthless, during my mercenary career after adulthood, I lost count of how many times I narrowly escaped death. And because I was ruthless, I went from a lone mercenary to a high-ranking member of a rising mercenary group in West Asia. At 26, I had firmly established myself in this world. I watched the news back home, seeing that man who had ruined my dad now respected as Mr. Yen. I thought it was time to return for revenge. After coming back, I met up with an old friend from the streets. He hadn't made it big and was still involved in shady businesses. Recently, he took on a job helping a wealthy heiress pose as kidnappers. Apparently, this heiress had seduced her brother-in-law, gotten pregnant, but he refused to go public. She came up with this idea to test her brother-in-law's feelings by having people pretend to be kidnappers. I looked at the employer's name and raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Yen Gang's daughter. I grabbed a fake toy gun and went. After all, for a group of people who'd never seen combat, a fake gun was more than enough. I watched coldly as the two delicate daughters of the Wilson family and the womanizing man caught between them. Ridiculous. While they were playing this childish game, I was fighting bloody battles. The huge difference in our fates was all thanks to their ungrateful father. I had no goodwill toward them, especially that man, who was engaged to the older sister but slept with the younger one, and to protect the unborn child, pushed his fiancé out as a scapegoat. Only the older sister was a bit foolish. Even at a time like this, she was still asking whose child it was. I couldn't help but laugh and interject. Even I can tell whose it is. She froze in place, her dark eyes shimmering with tears, lost and pained, watching the man leave with his arm around the younger sister. Those beautiful eyes instantly dimmed. The sun was setting then, the sky darkening bit by bit, the sunset light reflecting in her eyes, filled with hopeless gloom. In that moment, I clearly felt my heart skip a beat. I remembered when my dad was gone, and my mom left me without looking back. I was just like that, standing under the sunset, alone and drowned in despair. I clenched my teeth to stop myself from trembling. I recalled the results of my investigation. Yen Gang had stolen my father's patent, and within 2 years, he found a mistress and had an illegitimate daughter. After rising to prominence, he even moved the mistress and illegitimate daughter into his home, driving his original wife to death with anger and leaving a daughter neglected. I looked at the girl before me, overwhelmed by despair, and listened to my pounding heartbeat. I decided to give her a choice. She could choose to endure it all numbly, becoming a victim sacrificed by the Wilson family. In that case, I wouldn't hold back. Or she could choose to turn against the Wilson family and seek justice for herself and her mother. Then, I wouldn't mind teaching her resolve, courage, and resilience. I let her think for herself. to live for revenge or to swallow her pride. She thought all night. That night, I felt a rare unease. Honestly, I feared she would choose the opposite side. When she came to me the next day, I didn't even want her to say the answer. But thank goodness, she chose to make those villains pay. So, my plan changed. I no longer intended to do it myself. I let Yen Gang's daughter take action. I let his own daughter send him to prison. I began training this honest and fragile girl, starting with her physical strength. When a person's body is strong, their spirit won't be weak. She seemed to hold a grudge too, training with me relentlessly. In less than 6 months, her combat skills and tracking abilities had risen to top-tier levels among ordinary people. She could hunt and kill prey expressionlessly, letting blood splatter on her face. I always believed that hatred changes a person more than love. In my free time, I often stared at her figure in a daze. In a few moments, I suddenly didn't want to return to West Asia anymore, even though that was where I started. For several days, her smiling face in a white wedding dress kept repeating in my dreams. When I woke up, I clearly heard a voice in my head say, "Michael Davis, you're done for. You've fallen." But another voice said, "Michael, you're a street-raised mercenary. What right do you have to covet such beauty?" I was torn between these two voices daily, feeling unbearably anxious. And I even started avoiding her. Yet I found I couldn't escape. Just hearing her cry in her sleep made me leap up, rush over, hold her in my arms, and ache with heartache. What kind of pain had my girl endured? She woke in my arms, her wet eyes fixed on me, full of trust and indescribable excitement, striking straight to my heart. It was unclear who initiated it, but we kissed each other at the same time. After that day, I had a home again. Someone loved me. I began thinking about how I could stay openly by my girl's side. I ended my business in West Asia and transferred a sizable sum of savings back home. Then I reported myself. I hadn't hurt anyone. And I returned the ransom to John Smith. And Emily Wilson insisted it was just a prank we had planned together. My hired lawyer was effective. And in the end, my sentence was 1 year. After a year, I could stand in the sunlight and spend my life hand in hand with my girl. For that year, I let her pursue her revenge on her own, though I still assigned 2 subordinates to protect her in the shadows. What makes me proud is that she didn't use any of my people at all. She relied on herself to avenge all the grudges. Soon, a year passed, and on the day I was released from prison, Emily Wilson was waiting for me at the prison gate. She wore a sky blue dress, with no makeup, her long hair flowing over her shoulders. In her arms, she held a chubby baby, its big eyes looking at me intently. When she saw me come out, Emily handed me the baby. "Your daughter." It's hard to describe how I felt at that moment. Although I was only in my 20s, I had been rolling in violent conflicts for over 10 years, risking my life daily, and never dared to hope for a family. I didn't even dare to think of my dead family members, fearing that sand might blind my eyes and I wouldn't see the hail of bullets ahead. But on that day, with blue skies and white clouds, the sun shining brightly, the girl I loved held our daughter and smiled at me peacefully and serenely, as if all the suffering we had endured before was just a dream. When the dream ended, the rest of my life would be filled with peace and sweetness. I had only shed blood, never tears. But at that moment, my tears fell on my daughter's face. With one arm holding Emily and the other holding my daughter, I walked toward the sunlight that belonged to us. After many twists and turns, through numerous hardships, fate still gave me a piece of candy, didn't it?